Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Daily Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every Tuesday, Craig DeLuz. He is one of the two gentlemen behind the Rundown. Craig, thanks for joining me today, man.
Always a pleasure to be with you, sir.
So, to get things started off today, we got three stories I wanted to talk about briefly. I'm going to bring the first one up here.
Still there, sir? Sounds like I lost your audio.
My audio should be back and should not go away again. That's what happened. I built a brand new set for this, and not all of the settings were tweaked. So,
been there, done that.
Last week, J.P. Morgan, when a new Texas law took effect, saying you cannot have an anti-gun stance and write bills and write bonds, municipal bonds in Texas. J.P. Morgan basically pulled out of the municipal bond business in Texas. Well, now Louisiana is saying, hey, we've got the same kind of law, and off the Press Herald website, Louisiana is now saying, we've got the same kind of law. We want to know, J.P. Morgan, what is your stance on the Second Amendment? Do you have policies against Second Amendment firms? And looks like things are going to go poorly for J.P. Morgan in freedom-loving states.
Well, as well it should. I mean, let's just be frank. We're talking about they are basically inhibiting businesses or entities that facilitate the exercise of a constitutional right. If they were doing this to newspapers or to radio stations, if they were doing this to entities that gave people rides to the polls and stuff like that, people would be all up in arms. But the fact is that this is a Second Amendment this is a right that they don't necessarily see as a right. It's a right, but it's not a right. So therefore, they feel they can get away with it. And it's nice to see that that there are states out there who are willing to stand up and say, no, we're not going to allow you to discriminate against individuals and business entities that seek nothing more than allowing law-abiding citizens to exercise their constitutionally enumerated rights.
Yeah, and this is not exactly small money. In that story, Louisiana has $1.1 billion worth of J.P. Morgan bonds, municipal bonds. That's, if you spread that, and Louisiana is not exactly a highly populated state, especially if you take New Orleans out of the picture. It's a very rural state. J.P. Morgan stands to lose quite a bit of business if they don't straighten up.
Well, and I'm hoping that other states will fall in line, will follow suit. Even states that don't have this as a law, I'm hoping that we'll start to see states actually start to pass laws including this. So once again, we're not saying, all we're saying is, fine, you have a stance again with dealing with firearms, that's your thing, but these are not people who are engaging in crimes, right? These are people who are simply just, once again, want to use their credit or their ability to be able, they just want to be able to operate and be able to engage in a lawful, once again, constitutionally protected activity.
Absolutely. I want to get to our next story here, and then comments will start coming in. I'm sure we got one in so far, but I'm gonna hold on for a second here. Go to next story. This off FloridaPolitics.com. Nicki Freed, the Agriculture Secretary, who's actually the person responsible for concealed carry permits. I don't know why that's under agriculture in Florida, but it is. Nicki Freed has revoked a number of concealed carry permits, a total now of 28 Initially there were 22, now it's 28 people who were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th now have lost their concealed carry permits. I guess in Florida, you do not need to be convicted of anything to lose your concealed carry permit. All you need to be is accused. And I don't know what the the story really didn't go into what the accusation was. It could have been they were accused of swearing. I don't know.
Well, now according to their law, so what happens is they're allowed to suspend it, and then obviously, then if they are then convicted, then they'll lose their license altogether. Then they'll lose their concealed carry permit altogether. Now, in these particular cases, you have to be not convicted. Let me clarify. You have to be charged with a felony or other prohibiting offenses, and I don't know what the other prohibiting offenses are, but I'm going to guess that that's probably domestic violence misdemeanors, or at least included among those. What's interesting about this, and what I really find interesting is Nicki Freed is basically accusing these individuals of participating in an insurrection, yet nobody is being charged under the Insurrection Act, under the Federal Insurrection Act, and she also said that they're basically what they did is they're basically guilty of treason, and they've engaged in treasonous acts. Yet once again, nobody's being charged with treason. I'm wondering if this opens up the door for these particular individuals to go after and sue Nicki Freed for, I don't know, what would it be? Would it be libel or defamation of character or something like that? But yeah, it makes it. How do I want to put this? She is following the law in suspending their concealed carry permits if they are once again charged with a felony. So she's within the law. Now they moved it, and it's funny because Mike Pilwarski and I, he's from Florida, so we've had conversations about why this takes place, why it's in agriculture, and it was done a while back because it was done. It was done. I think it was done by the Attorney General, and it was always kind of going back and forth to partisan positions, and so they wanted to put it under something that they thought would always have a Republican. And, well, we see that didn't necessarily work. Or at least, let me clarify, someone who would be pro-gun, which, they assumed would be a Republican.
Yeah.
But we all now know that is not the case here.
All right. I'm going to get this in. I think this is referring to our first story. And Larry Benson says that basically redefines red flag laws with different words, reframing.
Which are regarding to the first?
I think so. I don't know which. I'm not sure which one he's referring to. I do know which one George Geller, the next comment, I do know which one this one's referring to. He says the so-called insurrectionists probably use the F word, freedom.
Yes, well, we all know when it comes to Democrats, we all do know that freedom is the F word. They're not interested in freedom. At least their idea of freedom is not the same as most of us. Their idea of freedom is you're free to do exactly what they tell you can do.
Absolutely, they are. You're free to agree with me.
Right, there you go. Well, exactly, and that's unfortunately they're trying to get them to understand that constitutional protections exist not for when it's easy, right? They exist for when it's hard. Like the free speech that isn't there to protect words or comments we all agree with. They're actually there to protect the things that people, especially the majority, may not like. The right to keep and bear arms, the reason why it's written in there is because there are people who are going to, in the name of safety, are going to want to make sure that, are going to want to take guns away from everybody. That way, in their eyes, they make sure that bad people don't get guns. But we all know that's not the case. The bad people get guns. All you do is wind up taking guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. once again, rights are dangerous.
Larry Benson replied, and this does make more sense now. He said the second, missed the first. Florida gun haters look for any excuse to attack. And that does make a lot more sense now when he commented that if they think that you've done something, they just think you've done something wrong, they're going to revoke your permit or at least suspend it.
Right. Well, now, once again, keep in mind, in this particular case, it's only suspended. So it's suspended until whatever the case is adjudicated. So it's not, it hasn't been revoked yet. And that's specifically in the law. They're required to suspend it if you are accused of, once again, of a felony, but it's not actually revoked until you're convicted. Now the question is, if they wind up pleading to a lesser charge, if it's a felony, well, then they'll lose their rights. If it's a misdemeanor, will it be a prohibiting misdemeanor that would cause them to then? Well, actually, I don't even know if it has to be a prohibiting misdemeanor. I don't know what the exact misdemeanors are. If you're convicted of anything, even if it's a misdemeanor, who knows? Maybe they can just go ahead and revoke your license.
Yeah, if you get convicted of 60 and a 55.
Right. Well, I can tell you in California, it's all basically at the whim of law enforcement. So if they decided that, you being accused of, you got arrested for something, even if files were never officially charged, if they feel that you being arrested for it was enough, they can then consider you to no longer be of good moral character, and they can revoke your license. Yeah, exactly. Wow. I mean, that's the problem when you start allowing them to have discretion. The reason why originally they were okay with sheriffs having discretion was because they knew the good people would be allowed to get a concealed carry permit, and not the bad people. And that was partially code for people of color.
Mm-hmm. Larry again says Senator Pizzo currently proposed legislation to reframe the criminal code as the public safety code. There's some of those buzzwords we just love. Public safety. Who isn't for public safety?
Well, to be honest, Democrats. Well, let me go back. There are law and order Democrats. I want to say law and order. There are Democrats who are looking at some of the things like defunding the police. Some of the crazy, outlandish things that are going on, like what do I want to call it? The decriminalization of crime and the release of violent criminals onto our streets. And they're like, whoa, wait, this is way too much. The problem is that they've been shouted down by the progressive Marxist left. They've basically been shouted down, and they're afraid within the Democratic Party to stand up. But if they actually took a look at the recent gentleman who's going to be the next mayor of New York, he's a Democrat. He's a former law enforcement officer, and he ran on law and order. So you got to think that, because he recognized one thing. Look, their constituents, in many cases Democrat constituents, their constituents are going to be the ones that are going to be the victims of many of these crimes. So it's probably important that you make sure that you actually enforce the law.
Yeah, amen. Let's get to our third story here, and there we go. Bloomberg's Every Town for Gun Safety targets Shank in Erie County Sheriff's race. Basic synopsis on this story is that Shank is a Republican, is fairly pro-gun. The opponent, Democrat, is completely in Bloomberg's hip pocket and is decidedly anti-gun. Bloomberg and Everytown is putting $200,000 just in the Erie County Sheriff's race. That's a ridiculous amount of money for a local sheriff's race.
Yeah, it is crazy, but I think they're testing a theory. First of all, understand who funds Everytown for gun safety. It's Michael Bloomberg, who can drop millions of dollars, and it's it's lent from his pocket. He can drop into that organization to fund efforts like this. In the end, there's a big move by many of them, by the Everytowns of the world, by the George Soroses of the world, to go after district attorneys and sheriffs, elected sheriffs, because their goal is to change the paradigm of how laws are enforced and how crimes are prosecuted. And they've been they've been successful in many urban communities when it comes to district attorneys. They've been less effective when it comes to sheriffs. You may wind up with sheriffs who are anti-gun, but it's a little bit harder to get sheriffs who are anti-law and order. So you're still going to get some sheriffs, even anti-gun sheriffs, who are going to stand up and be and still be, very law and order. And I think sometimes, especially with Republicans or conservatives, it's one of the dichotomy. It's one of the kind of places where we kind of run into each other, because the Republicans or conservatives tend to be law and order, but they also tend to be very much freedom and rights and pro-Second Amendment. And there are often times when sheriffs or law enforcement agencies, usually police chiefs, will come out as anti-gun, or they'll be promoting gun control that is anti-gun, but they'll say, I'm not anti-gun. But they'll be talking about it as a way in which to promote law and order. And you'll have some Republicans who will side with law and order over liberty and freedom and the Second Amendment and self-defense. And
I want to make a distinction.
Yeah,
I want to make a distinction. One, sheriffs are generally elected. Chiefs of police are generally appointed.
Yes.
There are a great number of chiefs of police who are anti-gun. It's actually fairly rare in my experience to find an anti-gun sheriff.
I think it depends on the county, because for example, San Francisco County, LA County is still getting a concealed carry permit now is easier than it used to be, but it's still very difficult. Alameda County, Yolo County, and I'm all mentioning all counties in California, but I think the more urban the county, the less likely they are to be pro-gun. Now, I will tell you this: a lot of anti-gun police chiefs may or may not necessarily be anti-gun individuals. They are implementing a policy that is put upon them by a city council. They're bureaucrats. They work for somebody. And they're supposed to implement the policies of the city council.
That's absolutely right. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. If they put you there, you towed their line.
Or you quit and you get a job somewhere else.
Exactly. Do you want fries with that? All right, let's get a couple more comments in here. New York Outcast, good to see you again. Says, good evening. The numbers tell us if they wanted public safety, they would want the people to be armed. Absolutely.
Understand that a lot of law enforcement are trained that anybody who doesn't have a badge but has a gun is only bad people have guns who don't have badges. And it's sad that many are trained that way, but it is. And the thing is that that's an attitude that most, by the way, rank and file cops don't have. They don't have that attitude. But the fact that it's part of the training tells you what the higher ups think.
Well, and think about when police are just going through their academy, their action word when they see a firearm is gun, and what happens when a policeman says gun? Everybody there draws and goes out on the subject they're trying to apprehend.
I think especially as the right to keep and bear arms becomes more prevalent, because I think we're going to have some good decisions coming out of the Supreme Court. At least I'm believing that we are. There's going to need to be significant law enforcement training on teaching them how to deal with law-abiding citizens carrying firearms, and because you cannot assume that just because someone is carrying a firearm that they are violating the law.
I want to go back to last night's Polite Society podcast. We were talking with Alex Uli, who generally joins us on Fridays. He joined us last night for Polite Society. And New York Outcast had a great comment. He's up in mid-state New York, and he has a permit. He's one of the people in New York that does. You can get them upstate New York. And he says, if somebody happens to notice that I'm carrying, they either think I'm law enforcement or a criminal. Either way, they leave me alone. So,
it's in California, it's kind of funny because in some places, some parts of California, it's like having a concealed carry permit is very, very rare, and in some counties, there are a plethora. I mean, our current sheriff, who's in his final term, he said he's not running for re-election, Scott Jones. When he first got elected, I want to say 11 years ago, there were 250 total concealed carry permits in the entire county. Now there's I think there's over 10,000 in the county. And guess what? There has been no increase in homicides or firearm deaths. There's been no increase in crimes involving firearms in Sacramento County, at least not when it comes to concealed carry permit holders.
I would think if there's that big of a jump, I would think there ought to be a decrease in overall crime eventually.
Well, overall there has been, except, in many places in California since 2015, by the way, that was when Kamala Harris was the Attorney General here in the state of California. Prior to that, we saw over 20 years of declining crime, declining violent crime, and declining violent crime involving firearms. When she came in with her whole smart on crime philosophy and started to decriminalize crime, started to release violent criminals from jail, started implementing sanctuary state policies, was when we started to see an increase, and it's been steadily increasing every year. And in the last 2 years, it's been dramatic increase. Once again, not just in crime, but in violent crime. And by the way, you've also seen a dramatic increase year over year in gun ownership in the state of California. Gee, I wonder why.
Next comment I want to get in here. One of our major problems is we've allowed politicians to get away with the whole mantra, my highest responsibility is to keep you safe. That's the biggest fallacy of our time. It's my job to keep me safe, not some politician.
Well, there is a responsibility of government to protect the rights of the individuals, to protect our rights. They are supposed to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic, but they're not allowed to protect us from ourselves. We have a fundamental right. First of all, we are our own first responders, period. When stuff goes down, the average law enforcement officer, for example, in my community, is 7 minutes away. So, now, if you want to understand exactly what that means, Newtown, that shooting only lasted for 4 minutes. So, if I can't expect law enforcement to be everywhere all the time, I have a responsibility to be my own first responder, which means that I need to be prepared medically. Also, I need to be prepared to protect myself from someone who's trying to do me harm. Me and my family and those around me.
Triggerology from your neck of the woods. In California, we will still deal with anything firearm related being looked at by law enforcement as criminal first, especially since California laws only mention firearms in the penal code.
I think depending on the state, and from what I understand, it's usually either in the penal code or in the the justice code, or they call it criminal justice code. But as far as I understand, that's pretty much where you'll find it in most states. I could be 100% wrong, but once again, it still comes back to the attitude that we have towards firearms and those who possess firearms. Mm-hmm. As long as you consider someone who desires to exercise their constitutional right to keep and bear arms, as long as you consider them to be a bad guy, then we're going to continue to have problems when it comes to enforcement of some of these laws and the rights of law-abiding citizens being violated.
Get this one in here quick. Scott says, Tennessee is constitutional carry the way it was meant to be. Get a clue. Scott, Tennessee is constitutional carry. They're late to the party, though. We were there first. South Dakota got there before you did. And Vermont, man, they were not Vermont. I'm sorry, New Hampshire led the parade. So we were all late to the party.
Well, California hasn't arrived at the party yet.
I honestly believe all the states are going to get there. I want to put hope in everybody's heart. All states are going to be constitutional carry. I believe within my lifetime, the way we're going to get there is going to be through the courts. It's going to take a lot of fighting. It's going to take a ton of lawsuits, but we're going to get there.
I don't disagree with you, and the biggest challenge is going to be is that we may have some folks even on our side on the Supreme Court who are not very well versed in firearms, and so I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I mean, yes, there's the right to carry, but the right to carry is literally just one of the important things that needs to be decided when it comes to the Second Amendment. The thing that's very difficult to get people who don't understand the Second Amendment as a fundamental right is this: the bad guys who want to carry are going to carry. Mm-hmm. They've got a gun, so you're making it so the good guys, people who will follow the law, won't carry a gun. It does absolutely no good because the bad guys who want to carry are carrying.
Amen. I along with you, man, I'm sure I'm an absolutist. I believe not only that I have the right to carry without the government's permission, but I have the right to carry whatever I want to, up to including an M1A Abrams tank. Should I? Well, but you know what I mean.
If you could carry it, I would be impressed.
But I don't think we're going to be able to get to the M1A Abrams tank in my lifetime, but I think we're going to get constitutional carry where you can carry any type of handgun you want, and I'm hopeful we can get civilians back in the possession of fully automatic, the M4, M16, the brand new ones. I'm hopeful we can get to there in my lifetime. So.
Well, once again, I go back to this. How often are automatic weapons used in the commission of crimes in the United States? Almost never. How often are 50 cals used in the commission of crimes in the United States? Almost never. How often are actually semi-automatic center-fire rifles actually used in the commission of crimes? Almost never. I mean, it's odd that these guns that they want to make sure that law-abiding citizens can't own or possess. Well, they're out there, number one, but they're almost never used in crimes. I don't get what your point is, or what their point is.
Yeah, the common truism is all enemies, foreign and domestic. How can I fight a foreign enemy if I don't have a weapon that is capable of? If China invades, I've got a semi-automatic rifle, better than nothing. But let me have an M4. Come on.
Right. No, I completely agree. And even if I had one, I would probably still, most of the time, be shooting it in single shot because ammo's expensive.
Absolutely. And I get paid once a month, so, I don't want to blow a month in just a minute or two. So.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we are right at the bottom of the hour, so anything else we should be talking about today, Craig?
Well, one of the things actually I think that's important to note was the Parkland families, the families of the Parkland folks, the individuals who lost their lives and were injured in Parkland. They actually settled with the school district there in Parkland, Florida, or the Broward County. Mm-hmm. Now for basically $25 million. Obviously, they accepted no fault, but I think it's important to understand that a lot of times people want to blame the firearm and they want to blame the tool, but in this particular case, what this case recognizes is that there was a duty and a responsibility, and they knew that this was an individual who they could have dealt with. And if they had dealt with the person, if they'd been more focused on dealing with people who are a danger instead of firearms that they believe are a danger, this was something that they probably could have prevented.
Amen. Every time something like this comes up, and if you haven't read this book in the audience, please go check it out. Warnings Unheeded: Twin Tragedies at Fairchild Air Force Base by Andy Brown. An amazingly fantastic book, and those lessons still haven't been learned. No. It's a case where time and time again we see it. People that are going to do bad things give warning after warning after warning after warning, and these warnings just fall on deaf ears because we're going to give them one more chance. We're going to give them one more chance.
Right.
So.
And in that particular case, it was, they didn't want to actually arrest him and take him into custody because they were part of some program coming out of the Obama administration that was about deferring youth and not getting them in the system. But this was someone who clearly needed help, and and they refused to do what they needed to do to get him the help that he needed, and that's why he decided to act out in the way that he did.
Amen. All right, well, let's go ahead and set this one aside. We're a little bit over time. Craig, thanks again for joining me today, man.
Always a pleasure. I want to encourage you folks, we're on the Rundown every day, Monday through Friday. It's now 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Just go to therundown.us, or you can find us on Facebook at 2A News Rundown. All
right. And that's 4 p.m. 2 p.m. Pacific time, you said?
Yes, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern.
4 p.m. Central. So once you're done with that, come over here at 5 p.m. Central time. Check us out every day. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.